The tears fell on his face like snow. My name is Alice's Sin, and welcome to Alice's Shelf, The Bloody Chamber. Yeah, today we'll be talking about the second tale on Angela Carter's The Bloody Chamber, which is The Courtship of Mr. Lyon, a take on Beauty and the Beast. So let's talk about the plot. Yeah, we start the tale with a personification of snow, which is said to have a light of its own. And that light is compared to our protagonist, the girl who also had a light of her own. And her father is traveling back home, and he is caught in a snowstorm. And he had lost all his money and couldn't even bring home the one gift his daughter had asked him for, a white rose. He goes to a house that's filled with melancholy, and he sees a white rose, but he doesn't pick it. He just goes to the door and he sees that everything's dark but for a window. And then he hears this big roar coming from the house as the gates close behind him. And that roaring is compared to a bird of prey. So we are already talking about hunting. He finds that the door has a golden lion knocker, and before he can knock it, the door opens itself and reveals a hall filled with flowers. Remember the flowers in the Bloody Chamber, the lilies, which represented sex and death to our protagonist? Motifs. Once he goes in, it's said that there's a perversive atmosphere of suspension of reality, which is a symbol for how the laws of the world he knew didn't necessarily apply to the rich. So we have a distinction in class here, which also happened in the Bloody Chamber. We have this very rich thing in the house compared to a poor girl and her father. Once the door opens, a spaniel wearing a diamond necklace comes to welcome him and guide him to a table in which he finds food and drink, and also the writings "Eat Me and Drink Me," which is obviously a reference to the best story ever, Alice in Wonderland. Such a beautiful name, isn't it? I love it. Let's also notice that the spaniel is wearing a necklace. And we just had it in the Bloody Chamber, a ruby necklace, a symbol of our protagonist's decapitation. And now we have a diamond necklace in the spaniel, a symbol of wealth. He eats, he drinks, he gets the mechanics information, and then the spaniel comes back with a hat, which means it's time for him to be gone. He starts to leave and he sees the rose. At that, he hears a roaring, but he decides to ignore it and take the rose anyway. At that, every light in the mansion explodes bright, and he hears as if a choir of lions announced the host. And once he sees the host, he thinks that the beast looks bigger than the mansion itself, which is a symbol for us not only to understand how frightening that must have been, but how the mansion is almost an extrapolation of the power inherited by the lion beast. The father shows the beast a picture of his daughter, Beauty, and Beauty had eyes that seemed to look through your soul, which is very interesting. And when the beast sees Beauty's picture, he tells the father to go and bring Beauty for dinner, which he does. And on this moment, we have a very beautiful quote. Although her father had told her of the nature of the one who waited for her, she could not control an instinctual shudder of fear when she saw him. For a lion is a lion, and a man is a man. And though lions are more beautiful by far than we are, yet they belong to a different order of beauty. And besides, they have no respect for us. Why should they? Yet, wild things have a far more rational fear of us than is ours of them, and some kind of sadness in his agate eyes that looked almost blind, as if sick of light, moved her heart. A few videos ago, we talked about Angela Carter's Vampirella and this beast caught between humanity and bestiality, and here we have the same thing. We have yet again this in between of a man and a beast, and we have the agate eyes. Remember the dolphin's eyes in the bloody chamber? Now we have another eye symbol, and the beast looks terrifying because it is somehow beautiful in a way that human beings shouldn't be. Remember how the vampire was so beautiful it was pitiful? When discussing the idea of the spaniel, we are told that the beast didn't like to have servants because the constant presence of humans reminded him of his inhumanity. So we are also told something about the beast. It is kind of pitiful. It has to be isolated from humanity because of its differences, because of how it looks. Frankenstein much? And then we have her introduced as Miss Lamb. Look at this. His great paws are the death of any tender herbivore. Like herself, Miss Lamb. Spotless, sacrificial. So he already represents somehow the death of her. Because she's just a lamb and he's a beast. She is to be sacrificed. What were we talking about? The role of women in a male society? As it goes in Beauty and the Beast, she stays with the beast for the sake of her father. However, that's a choice. She doesn't have to stay with the beast, but as the beast have spared her father, she decides to. So we already have a woman with choice, which is different from what happens in Beauty and the Beast. And when we get to Angela Carter's takes on the Little Red Riding Hood, we will see how important that is, that the beauty has chosen to stay with the beast. And in that moment, she sees the beast as the winged lion of the apocalypse. So yet again, a reference to death, to damnation. Now look at how interesting. They start talking, and when they do so, they start behaving as if they were old friends. And once the Cupid clock strikes 12, look at the image of the Cupid, which is connected to love, exactly. Strikes 12, he falls on her lap, licks her hand, and leaves on all fours. When a dog licks you, we say that that's a kiss, right? So that shows that he likes her, that he has feelings for her. And when he leaves in all fours, he's behaving like an animal, which means that yet in her presence, he feels safe enough to behave as the animal he is, as maybe the amphibious being he is, drawing back to the bloody chamber. When she decides to leave, he asks her if she'll come back, because it will be very lonely without her. And that almost brings her to tears, to see that that thing cared for her so. So look at the connection between a woman and a beast. We just talked about Elaine Schwalter's literature of their own, and what brings women together, what makes of all women something that can be connected. And here we have this idea of being in the in-between. She is in face of a thing that's half beast and half man. And that's how women are usually seen in a patriarchal society. The culmination of this will come in the last tale of the Bloody Chamber, Wolf Alice. So just keep on following us, and in a few weeks, this will all make more sense. But I believe it's understandable that women are seen in this position of they can't be fully themselves, but they can't be what is expected from them. They are not a man, as though men want them to be some way, but they can't be fully themselves because they are not allowed to. So they are not fully an animal and they can't be fully a human. That's what I mean by this amphibious place and this connection with the lion beast. When she meets her father at the hotel, he's waiting for her so that they can go and buy her furs. Remember that when I talked about the Bloody Chamber, I said that this idea of wearing furs is a motif on Angela Carter's stories? Here it goes. Buying furs, embracing her bestiality. First symbol. The next symbol for that is in the end of her adolescence, because her face doesn't acquire the prettiness that was expected. Instead, it starts acquiring some different, unique traits that reminded people of one of those very exquisite cats. So we have our protagonist becoming a cat. She's also becoming half person, half animal, as women are in a patriarchal society. I'll go back to that every time. This is one of the main statements Angela Carter makes in her texts. Women are in this in-between what is a human and what's seen as a beast. This place is where women are seen in a patriarchal society. I can't say enough of that. Keep up. The spaniel comes to find her and bring her back to the castle, for the beast is almost dying. And it's said that the spaniel would cry if it was not a dog. Remember what we said about Vampirella, that the vampire would cry if only she knew how to? Now we have a dog going through the same experience. Animals, women, the similarity Angela Carter poses every time. When she gets to the castle, we go back to that idea of the castle as an expansion of the beast, because as the beast's dying, the castle is also fading. The flowers are dead. The lion knocker is covered in black crepe. The place is dusty. So the castle and the beast, they are dying. And she notices for the first time that his agate eyes have lids, like those of a human. How did she not notice that before? Because she only looked at her own reflection in them? So at the moment she sees that the beast is also a man, she realizes that she was looking at the beast as herself, because they were similar. Her womanhood reflected in the agate eyes of the beast. And now the beast has lids, like men. Not that women don't, but that's the way Angela Carter poses it. That's using the resource of a metaphor. She kisses him and he becomes a man with a broken nose, which made of him the most handsome of all beasts. Do you see my notebook? So we mentioned that in Vampirella, how human beings, we're imperfect. And that's what makes us beautiful. And this is why the broken nose is so important, because it's what makes him a human, his imperfection. He's no longer a perfect lion, and that's why he's handsome. And finally, Mr. and Mrs. Lyon walk in the garden, the old spaniel with them. So they find themselves together in this middle ground and they live happily ever after, which is something rare in Angela Carter's texts. Her characters don't usually live happily ever after. But hey, Mr. and Mrs. Lyon did, so there's hope for all, I guess. Well, this was the first take on Beauty and the Beast by Angela Carter. Next month, we'll talk about The Tiger's Bride, which is a whole different take on it, but it also puts the woman in a place between humanity and bestiality. Did you get that? Type on the comments. Women are seen in a patriarchal society caught between humanity and bestiality. This is how Angela Carter always poses her women. I hope you like this video. Next week we'll talk a little more about Fury. We'll talk about Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own, which is one of the most important books in female criticism. So I hope to see you then. And remember, life's a sin.